This episode is brought to you by Purple Circle. Purple Circle takes the frustration out of technology and lets you focus on what matters most. With Purple Circle, you get a plan that enables you to get to your goal without having to worry about the technology. For your free consultation, head over to purplecircle.io. That's purplecircle.io. Hey everyone, and welcome back. This is bittersweet because we are in the last chapter of 7 endings by our own KJ Blackwood. Of course, this is the Blackwood and Fig show. I'm your host, Will Figueroa. That over there is KJ Blackwood, the author of this amazing book in the series that we've been in now 7 weeks. And we're talking about the last story, Poor Thing. But before we do, KJ, how are you? How have you been? And man, I'm bittersweet. I don't know about you, but this is really exciting for me.
I'm good. It's been 2 weeks since we last chatted, so I hope you had a good Easter. And yeah, this is exciting because after this, we'll then move on to other stuff.
Yeah. There's a bunch of cool stuff that we'll tease in a second. But it's good to have you here. I'm super grateful and honored that we're able to do this together. For Poor Thing, I'm going to try really hard not to spoil things, but I'm going to give people a fair warning because I don't feel like there's so much up front as it does totally in the end, right? So with that being said, fair warning up front. We may spoil some things either intentionally or unintentionally because it is a very, very interesting story. Tell us, KJ, tell us about the background on this story. Where were you when you wrote this? And what was some of the inspiration behind this? Because this definitely has like a Twilight Zone vibe. This has almost like a sci-fi, like this is definitely different than even the last one.
Yeah. Well, physically, when I wrote it, I was actually in the Far East because I was traveling around. But the story itself is based, when I imagine it, it's kind of where I grew up. And the sort of house it's in, I picture it on a particular road, actually, in just outside St. Albans. And it contains the sort of people that everyone knows, you know, there's always a couple of spinsters somewhere living together, certainly back in my day. And then you get the young man who, when I was younger, they would actually come door to door selling you crap.
Yeah. Tupperware, different things, right? Yeah.
Lint brushes.
Knives.
Yes. Perhaps not knives. Don't think that's allowed here. But yes, and so they would always have a sob story about how they'd just got out of the prison or the army or something.
Trying to make a good life.
Exactly, yes. And so these are real people. And then when they talk about the dog, Max, that was my dog.
Oh, okay.
I had a German Shepherd called Max. He was like my brother. The brother I didn't have.
Yeah.
And I adored him. And a dog. And I mentioned it before how much I love dogs. A dog it's a big part of your life, and almost irreplaceable part of your life.
Very much so.
And so I got thinking about these strange old ladies that you sometimes see, and you think they're all innocent, but there can be more to them. In fact, because we always assume, when we see old people, we think there's nothing to them except for being old. When actually they've lived long lives. They could have been doing some crazy stuff when they were younger. Maybe they're still doing it now. Like these. That's right. Ladies. Yeah,
that's right. There was a lot of intrigue as you wrote this book. Well, as I was reading as the reader, it was very intriguing because the level of detail that you go into in comparison to some of the other stories that you've written, you front load a lot of detail. I would argue even more detail up front on this story than all the other stories, than the 6 previous stories.
There's not a lot of plot to this one.
Mm-hmm.
As in, it's a very compact story, and so you need more detail to make more of it, and it allows you to really picture the scene. So to the extent of their, the tweed skirts that the old ladies wear, and their hair is like the Queen. It's white, but it's perfectly shaped, and it doesn't. And even he's wearing his sort of waistcoat from the charity shop because he thinks it looks a bit smarter, makes him look a bit more respectable. Makes him.
And he is Mark, right? We're talking about
Yes.
Mark, the main character here
Yes.
in this story. And so, explain to me in your mind, what did Mark do? You speak about in the beginnings. You speak about how Mark, would go into these houses as he's selling door to door, but then he would kind of pick something up and then sell it over at like a consignment shop or somewhere else. And you made it seem, and correct me if I'm wrong, you made it seem he's maybe 16, maybe 17. You made it seem like he was kind of young. Is that the case? And give me more on the background of Mark, because we basically start the story what seems like him basically coming out of a juvenile detention facility.
Yeah. So he's in his late teens, maybe 20, something like that.
Okay.
He's not a good guy.
Yeah.
Because he steals. Although he's the kind of guy who, at heart, they're not bad, but they just got into the
wrong crowd.
Exactly, yeah. And he's got into a habit of stealing things. He doesn't have any other way to make money, because if you got that on your record, it's hard.
I'm sure this is all he knows, right?
Yeah, it's all he knows. He's got gift of the gab. He can chat. He can make people think that he's nice and friendly, and so he can use that to fool them. And so he, despite being the main character, he's not the goodie. But then the other two, the old ladies, they're also not the goodies. They're all bad.
Yeah. There's a real twist in the plot here. So Mark is selling. I don't know what you would call it in
household.
Like napkins and knickknacks and doilies and things of that nature. And it's basically him stealing from one, selling from the other, right? Picking it up, and that's kind of his economy. You make it a very distinct point to when Mark is going house to house. When he finally gets to the old lady's place, the two ladies, you make it a point to really describe how decrepit this house is on the outside. And as a reader, immediately I'm thinking like Addams Family. I'm thinking like this really spooky, decrepit, a townhouse, if you will, but very like you make it a point to make it like very, very unkept. Is there a home that you grew up with that like that was that home, like that was that house on the block, or was this something that was just part of the imagination that you made?
No, that wasn't. It is sort of based on a house that I knew.
I knew it.
It's an ordinary small house, and the owner just didn't care about how it looked, and so the hedges would be overgrown, the grass wouldn't be cut, and there's a house like that on every street, and people will wonder about who's living there. Like, are they right in their head, or and maybe they're not. I don't know.
Yeah,
or maybe they just simply don't care. But yes, it is. It's based on a real house that's only a 5-minute walk from my parents' house.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Mark makes it a point to. It's almost, you almost make it seem like maybe this is even the last one for the day. He's already knocked on 2, maybe 3 houses for that day. He's already been the door has already been slammed in his face a few times at this point,
which is doesn't faze him.
Yeah. It's another day, right? And then he knocks on the house of, and correct me if I'm wrong, is it Matilda? How do you pronounce the names?
It's Matilde.
Okay.
Clements and Matilde.
Clements and Matilde.
Yes, which gives the impression that perhaps there's maybe a French influence, and maybe their backgrounds are a little bit exotic. Maybe.
Sure.
Yeah.
So there's no way, I think, at this point to not spoil, because we go into the house. He knocks on the door. So again, fair warning, if you haven't read Poor Thing from the book 7 Endings by our very own KJ Blackwood, now is the time. We're just going to go right into spoilers and stuff, because it goes to me, the story dives, it's not fast, but it's pretty consistent, because more and more it just gets creepier and creepier and creepier. And it almost gets to like an exponential rate towards the end. So Mark knocks on the door, and he doesn't think anything of it. Maybe he sees something in the corner of his eye with the window, and then just as he's turning around, I believe it's Clemens, right? Clemens who opens the door,
Yes,
and welcomes him in. Yeah, very, very interesting. Like I almost imagine, like, as the door opens in this story, like immediately the whiff of like the old dog and like the smell of like urine and like from the dog comes from the from the house, and then he goes into his spiel. Talk to me about the two women. Well, before we get into Mathilde, let's talk into Clemens. You make it a point to almost Betty White style description.
Yes.
Is that who you're kind of like basing this off of?
That would be the American equivalent. Yes.
Okay.
So cardigans, very homely looking, looks very innocent and sweet. Just a sweet little old lady. You think, how can, sweet little old ladies are just lovely and they never do anyone any harm.
How could they ever possibly do any harm? And she was so lovely. The way that you write her demeanor, the way that you write her character. It's come on in. Let me put a pot of tea on, and I'll grab some biscuits. And
you see, I think if somebody's that nice, wrong. There's something wrong. You need to be suspicious if people are that nice when they don't know you, because it's not right.
Yeah, too nice, too fast.
Yes, exactly. Too nice, too fast. And so I was about to say his spidey senses should be going off then, but she's almost like she's the spider, drawing him into her web. He doesn't realize it. He thinks he's
100%. Immediately, because you get a feel for who you are as a writer. Immediately, it's like he's dead. He's dead. Oh, and it's fantastic. But then it's like, oh, maybe she's dead, or maybe, and then you speak about like the inside of the home, and the way that you wrote the inside of this home. I even thinking about it now, I have an allergic reaction because it was so it was so detailed. It as you read it, you almost feel the stuffiness of the home, the smell of the old dog in the background that we later find out, has now passed recently. and oh gosh, you go into just this beautiful detail to really underline. I don't know how else to describe it. It's more than creepy. It only elevates the anxiety in which, as you continue to read, it's almost as if the home itself is its own character, as if it was watching this whole time. And then, of course, before we know it, we find that there's Mathilde in the corner. Can you explain Mathilde's character? There's a sense. There's a few characters that I could think of that as you read about Mathilde, you kind of understand to a certain extent. But I want to know where your inspiration for this character came from.
They're like sisters. They are sisters.
Yeah.
Well, no, he doesn't. Are they sisters?
So they are sisters.
Yes, I think because of having the similar names, the French.
I see. Okay.
But she's obviously silent, but her eyes, you can there's something there behind her eyes. She's thinking something, and her silence, as you find out later, isn't a permanent thing. So she's not right in the head. She's not right. In the head. If the situation isn't as it's meant to be for her, she's mute. She doesn't speak. Very upsetting for her sister Clemens. But they're very similar in terms of the way they dress and everything. But she's got these big glasses that just emphasize her cold blue eyes. And
it's not comical. It's not a comical. Oftentimes you'll see people with big bottle cap glasses, and it's. I would argue 9 times out of 10, it's for almost comedic relief. But the way that you write it, not so much for comedic relief as it is, again, to just stir that anxiety, to literally emphasize that Mark is being watched.
Well, and you know how, if you know that if somebody's staring at you, it's very uncomfortable.
Right.
If they're not,
you feel it.
speaking.
Yeah, you feel it.
Yeah, you do. I mean, imagine you go into, I don't know, a job interview or something, and you sit down and then they just look at you and don't say anything. That's horrible, isn't it? And having the thick glasses just emphasizes the strength of that stare, and that there is definitely something going on inside that head. So you can't assume that because somebody's mute that they're stupid. There's nothing going on. They're definitely
right.
In fact, she's excited. She's excited that he's arrived.
There's an anticipation on their end, an anxiety on both the reader's end and Mark's end. So I love how it's like this diverse, as the anticipation is rising, anxiety is rising, their excitement is also going up at the same time. So the way that you write it, it's almost competing emotions. Towards the end, you realize, oh, this wasn't so much a comparison of anxiety as it was a race of emotions. Whose emotion is more excited than the other? Because at one point, finally, the tea is served, right?
Yes.
And that's interesting, because as he's being served, he realizes that there's some of these older things. Can you explain some of the older things that he finds? You make it a point several times to say that, to say, well, what Mark, the character, says, do they even make this anymore? Is there a reason why you did that?
Yes, it's to imply that whoever owned those things wasn't there recently. They were there a long time ago. For example, high-tech train. I don't know if that was ever a brand in America, but high-tech trainers, when I
wouldn't know.
They were a big deal.
Okay.
I don't know if they make them anymore, but it was that's from like 30 years ago. And then those little Casio watches with the calculator on. You can buy modern ones now, but they were common when I was a kid. And so those are there to illustrate that there have been other men there over the years, and yet these items don't look like they're that old. They look as if they've been there by somebody almost recently, but they're old things. It's just to emphasize that it's a bit weird. There are men that have been there. Who are these men? Where are these men? When all they ever talk about is this bloody dog.
Right. So we get to a point into the story where I guess he's kind of caught in a lie, which I find so interesting. So somehow they get into a conversation and they talk about how he talks about this fake dog. He lies that, oh yeah, I've had a dog, and it's meant the world to me. And so Clemens speaks about, oh yes, we've had a dog, and I feel like that's kind of where the shoe kind of falls. It's like, like this is where this is really kind of starting here. Yeah. Tell us about that.
The picture they show him of the dog is clearly a very old picture, because you can tell it's an old picture. But then they say that he died a few months ago. That can't be right. So he lies about, says he's got his own dog. And I think what's interesting is that, so he thinks they're falling for his lies. They're not stupid. They know he's probably there to rob them. But it doesn't matter. Because he's their victim, not the other way around.
Oh, that's interesting. I would not have guessed that they knew that he was there for malintent. I would have just, the way that I read it, I would have just assumed that they didn't care what he was there for. They knew what their intentions were.
These are two women they're not good people. They'll assume the worst of people's characters. He's saying he needs to go up to the loo. He's probably going to have a rummage around, see what he can take. But
that's right, because it gets weird at one point, because he sits down and he looks over, and then we're introduced to Mathilde, and Clemens talks about how, oh yeah, she hasn't spoken in so long, and don't mind her. And I imagine like these big eyes just kind of just kind of looking, and it's like, well, how do you not like mind, these eyes, it's almost like, it's almost as if the eyes are touching him, that it's like, oof. And so he gets really, really uncomfortable. And so excuses himself and says, can I use the bathroom? And so of course he goes upstairs, and they explain that, it's just upstairs and to the right. And he figures, well, maybe this is his time to look and see what he could pinch really quickly, right? What can he take quickly? And so he notices kind of these older things and pretends to use the bathroom, and comes back downstairs. And then like it's the moment. This is when it starts getting really like fast, really quick, because before we know it, it's you've entered the Twilight Zone. It is so left field. This and I thought, oh well, maybe this is like the previous story with the cats. Maybe this is like no. he and Mark enters this door, and when he leaves the upstairs, it's a whole other direction. So before we go there, let me go ahead and plug a few things. If you haven't already, make sure you pick up that book right there, 7 Endings by our very own KJ Blackwood. There, we are talking about Poor Thing, the last in this 7-story series. And sure enough, that tagline, that on the bottom of that book, 7 short stories to make your skin crawl and your eyes water. I have cried, and Poor Thing has definitely made my skin crawl. So if you haven't already bought the book, head on over to Amazon. If you have a Kindle Unlimited subscription, you could pull that book from there as well. Just phenomenal, just brilliant. So if you haven't already done so, please be sure to do so. Also, if you haven't already, head on over to the merch store, blackwoodandfig.com/merch, and pick up shirts and hoodies and all that other stuff. It supports the show. And then finally, be sure to text the show, BAFShow, to 305-697-6013, where you can go ahead and continue that conversation. Text us, give us questions. If maybe you're reading a book and you want to give us a suggestion, go ahead and put it in. Give us that suggestion. Give us that book or that novel, or even a comic, whatever. It doesn't matter. We would love to be able to dive into it. And of course, as always, you can always continue the conversation over at blackwoodandfig.com. I think that's everything that we can plug. Just before we get into the twisted here, again, fair warning, this is definitely the moment where we're going to talk about and dive deep. Oh my God. This is So Mark now comes down the stairs. He sits down. He feels the eyes of Mathilde. He takes a sip, and he gets whaled with this. He starts getting wooey. He starts getting, like, oh man, what is this? And instantly he realizes, I've been drugged.
Yes. And he knows because it's the kind of, he's done it to people. He knows what happens.
Oh, so he immediately knew, almost as if he was getting a taste of his own medicine, no pun intended. Yeah, he's getting maybe what came to him. Oh, that's so interesting. So then that leads me to believe that maybe he was in this detention center for other reasons other than theft. What do you think? Like when you wrote him, was that the intention?
It could be. I think if he's used Rohypnol to knock somebody out, it would be to rob them, not anything else, because he's bad, but he's not that bad. He's not an evil monster. He's just a cheeky chap who breaks the law. So yeah, that's why he's familiar with how that works. And so as he gets woozy, he thinks, "Oh, shit."
Yeah. I know exactly what's going on now. And then
that's it. Game over.
It's kind of game over.
Yeah.
Talk to us about how he gets dragged out. He kind of knocks over and he gets woozy, and then before he knows it, it feels as if you talk about as if a needle point in his neck, just boom, 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 boom. Talk to us about that. And
I'm not a surgeon, so I wouldn't know how to,
if it's even possible, right?
I wouldn't know how to remove somebody's ability to speak, but I figure if you've got needles being jabbed repeatedly into your larynx, that's probably going to affect how you speak. And so they've managed to, the two of them managed to get him out into this shed or whatever, and they've been poking away at his throat while he's unconscious and semi-conscious, and so he loses the ability to speak.
To scream for help.
Yeah, can't do anything. All he can do is make a sound that's a bit like a dog.
Bit like a dog. Oh gosh! And immediately we find ourselves there's a break. There's that break in your writing. There's the break again. There's a paragraph break. Time has now gone by. We don't know how much time has gone by between that moment in which he feels his neck and then he wakes up in a shed, chained, much like a dog, to the end of this shack. I don't know what else to describe it. It just seems like a almost like a metal shop or like a wood shop or something,
or a kennel even. Or
I was just gonna say, or a doghouse, which is absolutely insane. Why don't you tell us the rest in and where do we go from here? My gosh, he wakes up and he tries to speak for help and he can't. He realizes that there's this bowl. Talk to us about the scene as the writer, you writing this.
I see it from his eyes, and so
so first person.
Yes, he slowly starts to realize what he now is. He's their new pet. He's their new Max, because there's a dirty window in this shed, and he looks out and he sees the line of graves. And they all have the same thing on them, Max, our beloved boy, whatever it is. And then it all makes sense, the different men's trainers and the watches and everything. So they had a German Shepherd called Max, which was in that picture, that very old picture. He died, which obviously upset Mathilde, and so she stopped speaking, and he needed to be replaced. And so Clemens somehow found this way that if you replace him with a man and treat him like a dog, that replaces Max. And then Clement and Mathilde
and then she starts speaking. She's like a normal person.
So each time Max dies, they have to get a new one. And of course, humans normally last a lot longer than a few years, so clearly they don't treat them very well.
So that was the other thing too that I wanted to talk about. Was it because were there so many because they weren't treated well, or was there like a sci-fi, like were they like these ancient, because we kind of did the sci-fi thing with the fear of flying, right? We went into like this metaphysical, almost spiritual kind of thing, maybe heavenly interaction with Arthur and his wife and that story. I thought I thought that maybe these women were, these spirits. I thought maybe these women were, because there were so, you speak about like these five graves, right? I think it was 5. I thought maybe there was something else. Maybe these were like demons or demonic. I thought that, that they had lived out their lives as dogs and then they would pass and then they would do it again.
It's that if you have a human being locked up, chained in a shed in all weathers, that they're not going to last particularly long.
Oh my God.
They'll get ill and they'll die.
Oh goodness. And then that's kind of it, right? We have Mathilde,
their own excrement and urine and being thrown crap food in a bowl.
And
a few years at most.
And that's kind of the story, right? It kind of ends that way, where he kind of is looking up and
this realization. That's it now. That's it until he dies and becomes the 6th grave.
Until he becomes the 6th grave. There's so many openings. Every single story, every 7. There's another story. There's another. This is my wish. It's like, oh gosh, I hope there's another 7. I hope there's another 14 of these stories, because there's so many different ways that these stories could have gone. For me, at least, when we get to this point where he's being uncomfortably pet by Mathilde, I dream of this of an extension where, you know, he escapes, or he, you know, there's a there's something else. And like I said, I thought we went like into the spiritual, because I think, wow, you know, 7 graves, or, you know, 5 graves, 6 graves, like there, you know, that's a lot of time. You know, maybe this was like supernatural. Maybe these were certain things. You know, maybe this whole thing is an entire dream sequence. You know, it's like the mind. You know, my mind kind of went into this other direction. If you could do it again, if you could write the question, if you could write this story again, would you have gone into more detail with Mark or the ladies? Because it's so spotty, you know. And to Nat's point, she brings it up here. How did these ladies even get to that point, right?
That's what I was going to say. I would maybe have a bit more about their history and how did they become like this? How did it happen? Because clearly they become mad, and how did that happen?
Right.
Was losing their beloved Max.
The prequel, yes.
And at what age did that happen? You know, were they young? Were they middle-aged when that happened?
Max, the first grave.
Yeah. The one that really was loved.
Yeah. What happened? Was it Mathilde? Was it Clemens? Was it like, so in your mind, how did these ladies get to this point? What is the beginning of that story? Is it just the desperation from Clemens to have her sister back? Is it what do you think happened?
I think the madness stems from never meeting anyone.
The
2 of them, and so they've never really lived a life, and so you can be. I think loneliness can cause insanity. I really do. And despite being together, they are lonely because they've never had a fulfilled life, and that's the seed. I think that's the seed of their madness. And then when that's all, when you don't really have anything else, you don't have a relationship or something, you focus on your pet, and that pet becomes the everything. It's
sure.
Everything revolves.
The new child, right?
Yeah, it is. It is like a child. And then when you lose it, the absolute trauma of losing it, that could tip you over the edge if you're already halfway there.
Of course.
Yeah. And
of course. So is the moral of the story here for you, you know, being with someone, the importance of, you know, true love? Is it the loyalty of a sibling? You know, what's the, you know, because I feel like every other story had some type of value, right?
Maybe it says something about me, and I think that if I were alone, wouldn't be good for me. I'd probably become something like a murderer or something, you know. But of course, some people are absolutely fine on their own, but it doesn't work for me, I think.
Yeah.
I
think as humans, right, we have this innate want, you know, this desire to be with our own kind, right? To be with another person. We don't like to be alone, right? It feels weird, you know, to be alone. It doesn't feel natural to be alone. Nat brings up another question, right? She asks, how do they choose who their new Max will be? So is there a qualification?
They're like spiders. It's just luck. So, these young men that come around door to door, doesn't happen very often. And it's just pure luck. Just has to be a young man.
Animal instinct. Animal like opportunistic instinct.
Yeah. What I would say though is, with this story, the young man Mark, I almost think he deserves what happens to him, because I know it's a bit.
Why is that? My gosh.
Well,
wait, is it because of what you mentioned before, or that maybe he's kind of drugged these other girls or other people in his life, or
he's gone in with bad intentions? He's gone in wanting to steal from these ladies. So, you know,
oh my gosh! But a life of slavery, a life of
you know, bold lessons and punishments are a way of encouraging people to be good in the future. You'll have a future.
Oh my gosh!
Does he deserve sympathy because he was going in to rob them?
Oh man, maybe it's just the spirit in me. I don't know, like, or maybe the American in me that, you know, people deserve a second chance kind of thing. But to your point, though, he did he did kind of have a second chance, because you write the story on his second chance and he continues again.
Yes.
So you almost have to wonder.
He's treated his second chance with contempt.
Yeah. He's thrown it away, right? He went right back, right? Oh man, she's really getting into it. Nat writes, "Why only men? What happened to these women that men should only be treated like dogs?"
Well, Max was a boy dog, so
for no other reason than that, it's just to replace a male dog, with with another man. Wow. Fantastic. Honestly, this has been just an amazing ride with these stories. Is there anything else that you would change? Is there anything else that you would have expanded on? And not just Poor Thing, really, any in the series. I mean, they've all been wonderful. Would you have changed anything at all?
I would have tried to make some of them a bit longer, I think, by going further into the characters and the reasons they are the way they are, maybe, so that there's less vagueness about their motives. Although I think sometimes I do enjoy when you don't know and you have to wonder. That can be interesting too. But yes, I'd probably go into more detail about the characters. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite of the 7? Is there one that's like really like, I wrote this in a place and season in my life, and this one means a lot to me? I almost imagine like The Dark Photographer, or if I had to pick one for you, I would think either The Dark Photographer, or, because that one was deep. I feel like the deeper ones were a good one, or The Fear of Flying. I would feel like those two would maybe be the favorites. Fear of Flying. Oh gosh, yeah. That
because
one
it makes me so emotional even now when I reread it.
Yeah,
it makes me sad.
It's almost real. I mean, quite frankly, arguably, it could be real.
Yeah, I mean, just that feeling of loss,
Yeah,
losing your companion. Oh, it really hits me every time.
It hits home. Yeah, it hits home.
It's like, when you watch Beaches, you know what's going to happen, and every time you watch Beaches, you're bawling. It's like that.
Yeah. This has just been an amazing ride. I'm so happy and grateful that we've had this experience to talk creatively about what you've created. And I love that as arguably two very different people, we can come together and talk about art. And I think this is art. I think this is a brilliant piece of art. I think it's fantastic. I think there's values and morals that you speak about here that are, they can go on for forever. They can go on for generations. And you really kind of keep to, regardless in a fun way that you do it, where, the skin crawls, that makes you cry, or you really do anchor each story into arguably a piece of like the human experience. And I love that, and I appreciate that. If you were to add another story, what would be the human experience in which it would be anchored in, and why?
Well, I thought about this because, as you know, I've got a little book where I write story ideas.
Yes.
And loneliness. I know that is a feature of a lot of things I write about, but I've got this thing about lonely people, and I think that's because that's the thing that scares me most. And it's the thing that, for me, would be the most damaging thing. I have a predisposition to becoming, I suppose, a bit self-destructive if I'm left on my own for too long. And so I always have this interest in people who I perceive to be alone. And then I wonder about their lives and what kind of weird stuff has gone on in their heads, and have they remained sane?
Yeah.
So yeah, loneliness would be the theme. I think because ultimately, I want people to be happy and to think about relationships and to treasure them. And like in the communication era, the couple, think about what you've got, think about what you can appreciate and communicate, and focus on the love, not the negative stuff. So even though the stories, there's a lot of dark stuff in them, ultimately, I think the intention is positive.
Yeah, there's even a if you've been to Tony Robbins, they do a similar practice where they have you kind of really think about, like, what is the worst case scenario? Really, really, truly, what is the worst case scenario? And it's really life changing. And if you have the opportunity, if you have the privilege to experience a Tony Robbins event, specifically Unleash the Power Within, and he's not sponsoring this. This isn't, this is my own personal experience. But they talk about this, and there's other even psychological exercises where, by thinking about the worst, really feeling about the worst case scenario, in turn, you can come out as a better person, because now you understand what you value. You understand, like, oh man, if I lost this, well, then I need to appreciate her or him or that thing or the dog or the pet or the animal, everything that we've kind of spoken about. And I think that's the beauty of 7 endings. It's almost as if, these are like the ghosts of Christmas past, like each story is a morality tale. It's really something that at the end, and to your point, these are only stories of warning, to be quite honest. This is how I read this. Now that we've spoken, now that we've gone through all of it, having gotten to know you as an author and as a friend, to really understand that although the technique is to make the eyes water and to skin crawl, it's really because you want to make sure that people are happy. And the real priority, that we should all be happy and focus on that happiness and to really be present. And I think that's the big story overall. And correct me if I'm wrong. The big story overall is just to be present, recognize what you have, and recognize that it's, the present is a gift. I hate to sound so cliche, but right? Like, is that how you would bundle 7 endings?
It can be gone like that. So yeah, you need to appreciate the good stuff while you have it. Life is ups and downs. So if you're on a down, no, there will probably be an up as well.
Yeah.
Look forward to. But yes, just appreciate everything that you have before it's gone. But even if it does go, things will get better. Well.
That's right. Yeah. It's always, what is it? It's always darkest before the sun rises.
Yes. Yes, that's very true.
This has been fantastic. I don't know if you want to add anything else before we tease our next series. I'm really excited about what you're bringing to the table and what we're going to be able to talk about next. Any final thoughts before we start teasing the next few weeks?
I've just really enjoyed these last few weeks. It's been really good fun. Who doesn't like talking?
Being in relationship. Who doesn't love being in relationship, right? Yeah. And I hope that I hope our watchers, our viewers and our listeners feel the same way. We appreciate you. Thank you for being a part of this first in our series. Again, and finally, this is it. If you haven't read our very own KJ Blackwood's book, 7 Endings, this completes the series, 7 Endings by KJ Blackwood, 7 short stories to make your skin crawl and your eyes water. It has been a fantastic journey, and the last few weeks have just been really spirit-filling. As I was reading this book, as my wife and I read this book, and I'm sure others, what comes off at first on surface level is, sci-fi and creepy, and then when you finally take a moment to really understand some of the characters, and I think this is my challenge and encouragement to anyone who watches this first series, is to really dive deep, really understand where was the writer. Ask these questions, reach out to, go to your library and get, your local historian or figure out, what is the history behind certain things so that you could really understand what some of these things mean or what they may represent during that time dive deep, dig deep. If I've learned anything with Seven Endings, is that not everything is all that it seems. And I think that's without a doubt kind of the best way to describe this book. Not everything is what it seems. So with that being said, let's go ahead and I'm going to take this down. KJ, tell us about the next set of stories that we're going to be talking about. Because now that we're done with Seven Endings, right? Talk about appreciating what you have and now it's gone. Now that we're done with Seven Endings and it's in our hearts, what do we have to look forward to in the next few weeks? What's the story that we're going to go into next?
Well, you know how everyone loves the Kardashians,
right?
A family of, are they 5 or 6 sisters? I always forget.
Yeah.
And then there's the brother that nobody's interested in. In the UK, we had a similar family years ago called the Mitford sisters.
Yeah.
Family. And I don't know how many people in America would have heard of them, but they were so interesting because it was an aristocratic family. They had, I think it was 6 sisters and the brother, and then the sisters were so different. So there was Nancy the eldest, who became a famous author, moved to Paris, was always wearing Dior, and had a very long affair with a French general. Then you had Jessica, who was a confirmed socialist, ran away to, I think, fight in the Spanish War, and then ended up in America, where she wrote an expose of the funeral industry in America.
Oh my gosh.
And in fact, her grandsons are famous civil rights campaigners now in America. I can't remember the name of their father, but I will check. And then you had the 2 Nazi sisters. So there was one, Diana, who married a Guinness of the Guinness family.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And then when she was very young, so very, very rich, but then left him and took up with Oswald Mosley, who was the leader of the British Union of Fascists.
Oh my gosh.
And then the other sister, Unity, who became obsessed with Hitler. She went to Munich, and there was a restaurant that he would go to, and she would go and sit at that restaurant hoping to see him, and she would just be staring at him, and eventually he invited her over. She became friends with Hitler, and then when war broke out, she shot herself in the head, but didn't die. And Hitler paid to send her back to the UK. It's amazing. And then there was another sister who was a bit more dull, married a millionaire scientist, and then took up with a lady horse rider. And then there was the youngest one, Deborah, who became the Duchess of Devonshire.
Oh my gosh. So juicy.
Yeah, really juicy. And they've written
really juicy.
So many books, and they were always in the news, just like the Kardashians.
Oh
it was
my
the
gosh.
most glamorous, crazy family.
Well, this is going to be fantastic. It will definitely bring a new dynamic to the show and to the series, because our own KJ here, he's our expert on the Mitford sisters. So there's definitely going to be a difference in dynamic here on the show. So if you want to see that and so much more, be sure to watch, follow, like, subscribe, tell your friends and family about it. It's going to be fantastic. I can't wait. I'm very, very excited about this. I almost want to hear about the Dole sister who just married the scientist and, and goes off because, of a scientist. I don't know. I feel like there's a series there, In any event, KJ, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much. Looking forward to speaking to you soon. And for all of our viewers, we'll see you soon. Take care. Bye, everyone.